Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling, well, a really interesting prediction that completely missed the mark.
Oh, yeah. Which one?
The idea, back in the 2000s, that physical books were basically done finished.
Ah, right. The great ebook takeover that didn't quite take over.
Exactly. Everyone seems so sure. Ebooks were the future. Physical media was dead. Remember that?
I do. It felt like a certainty. You had the rise of digital music, digital video. Books seemed like the next logical step. The argument for it was, frankly, pretty compelling.
It really was. I mean, think about the advantages they live. Producing them is way cheaper, right? No paper, no printing presses, no shipping trucks.
None of that, which you'd assume means they should be cheaper for people to buy. Much cheaper.
And better for the environment, supposedly. Plus, think of the space saved. My bookshelves would thank me if I'd gone all...
No, mine too. And traveling, imagine carrying hundreds of books without any extra weight.
Oh.
Total game changer.
Plus the convenience. You could buy a book instantly, anytime, anywhere, and search inside it.
And don't forget the accessibility, changing the font size, background color, special fonts for dyslexia. That's genuinely useful stuff.
So on paper, pardon the pun, ebooks looked unbeatable, the inevitable next step.
Absolutely. It seems like a slam dunk. Bookstores were going to become quaint little museums.
But that's not what happened, is it?
Not even close. Ebooks definitely shot up fast at first. Huge growth. But then they just sort of stalled.
Yeah, they hit a plateau, never got close to wiping out physical books.
Nope. The numbers vary, and we'll get into why that's complicated. But they seem to have settled around, maybe 20% of the market?
Around there. And lately, some data suggests physical books are actually gaining ground again. Even as audiobooks are exploding, it's fact.
It really is. So the core question for this deep dive is, why? If the logic was so strong, why did this supposedly inevitable trend just stop?
That's what we're digging into. We've got a stack of sources looking at the data, the money side of things, and, the human element. Why didn't the digital future fully arrive?
Let's unpack it. There's a lot more going on than just convenience.
Okay, so let's start with the tech itself. Because early on, reading on screens wasn't great. Eye strain was a real issue.
Definitely. Reading a novel on an old LCD screen, not fun. But then dedicated e-readers came along, like the Kindle, the Kobo.
Right, and they were different. They really tackled those initial problems head on.
They did. The e-ink screens, they look a lot like paper. No harsh backlight, less blue light. You need external light to read them, just like a real book. Much easier on the eye.
That made a huge difference. And they also tried to fix that weird feeling of not knowing where you are in a book.
Yeah, that loss of spatial awareness.
Yeah.
Knowing you're about 3/4 through just by the feel of pages left. E-readers tried to mimic that with percentage progress bars.
Giving you some sense of location, even if it wasn't.
Exactly. And another big plus for dedicated e-readers. They weren't your phone.
Yeah.
Fewer distractions. No constant notifications pop.
Which helps you actually read instead of getting sidetracked. So, okay, the technology got pretty good. It solved a lot of the user experience.
It really did. E-ink was a major breakthrough for long form.
So why did the sales flatten out? If the reading experience was fixed, what stopped the takeover?
Well, this is where things get messy. When we started digging into the sources for actual market share data, it was surprisingly hard to find reliable.
Really? For such a big market?
Shockingly difficult. A lot of the charts and stats you see floating around, they often don't say where the data came from. No sources cited.
Which basically makes them useless. How was it collected? Who was included? Who wasn't?
Exactly. As one source put it, data without a source is just pretty bad data. Instantly questioned.
So what about the good data, the properly sourced stuff?
Often locked behind really expensive paywalls. We're talking like $200 a month for market research report. And you usually can't even see what they measure before you pay up.
Wow. So it's tough for anyone without a big budget to do serious analysis?
Very tough. But even beyond that, there are two massive elephants in the room when it comes to book data.
Okay.
First, Amazon. They're huge in the book market. Estimates are around 50% of all book sales, maybe even higher for ebook. And for audiobooks with Audible, something like 65%.
Right. They dominate.
But a lot of traditional publishing industry reports don't include Amazon sales. Amazon doesn't always share its data with those industry bodies.
So if you're looking at data that leaves out potentially half the market, especially the most digital-heavy part of the market.
Your data is, basically worthless for understanding the big picture. You're missing the biggest piece.
Okay, that's a huge distortion. What's the second elephant?
Self-publishing. It's enormous now. And it's almost entirely digital ebooks and print on demand.
Right, authors publishing directly through platforms like Amazon, KDP.
Exactly. And most traditional data collection focuses on the big publishing houses, the big five, and other established players. They often ignore the massive volume of self-published digital sales.
So again, you're missing a huge chunk of the digital market, which make physical books look artificially more dominant in the stats.
Precisely. And then there's another layer of confusion: revenue versus units sold.
Okay. Explain that.
A lot of headline focus on revenue, the total amount of money made, billions of dollars. Sounds impressive. But physical books, especially hardcovers and fancy special editions, cost way more than most ebooks. One $30 hardcover brings in the same revenue as maybe $3 or $4, $8.
So measuring by revenue makes the physical market look bigger in dollar terms, even if people are actually reading more individual copies digitally.
Exactly. If you want to know what format people are actually consuming, units sold is a much better, much more honest metric than revenue.
Why do publishers focus on revenue?
Well, it looks good for shareholders, right? Shows the traditional side is still bringing in big, partly institutional habit, partly a way to frame the narrative positively for the established print.
It masks the shift in acting habits.
It can. Yeah. And the sources found some almost comical examples of bad data visualization. One report had a graph where the text claimed hard copies had 73% market share.
Okay.
But the pie chart right next to it clearly showed the hard copy slices maybe a third, around 33%.
Wait, seriously? The text and the chart flat out contradicted each other on the same page?
Yep, blatantly contradictory, which just highlights how unreliable some of this reporting is. You just can't trust it blindly.
So the big takeaway here for listeners is what? Be skeptical.
Definitely be skeptical. That commonly quoted figure, ebooks plateauing at around 20%. You have to take that with a big grain of salt.
Because Amazon's missing, self-publishing's missing, and they might be using revenue tricks.
Right. True digital consumption is almost certainly higher than those standard figures suggest. But even so, the main point holds. The crazy exponential growth did stop. Ebooks didn't conquer the world.
Okay, so the data's murky, digital's probably bigger than reported, but it still hit us. Why? If the tech worked, what else was going on?
This is where we get into the less tangible stuff, the human fact. Why do people still cling to physical book, even when digital is often easier?
Right. Beyond just habit, what's the appeal?
Well, first, there's the simple tactile experience. It sounds a bit romantic, maybe, but the feel of the paper, the weight of the book, even the smell. A lot of readers genuinely value that sensory.
I get that. It feels,
Yeah.
But is there more to it? You mentioned spatial.
Yeah, and research suggests this isn't just nostalgia. Our brains often use physical cues to map information. When you hold a book, you remember things like that plot twist was on a left-hand page near the bottom.
You have a physical location for the memory.
Exactly. With an e-reader, every page looks fundamentally the same. The weight doesn't shift as you progress. That lack of physical anchoring might make it slightly harder to retain complex narratives.
Interesting. So it's not just preference, it might actually affect recall.
It's plausible. The research is ongoing, but it points towards a potential cognitive difference. But even if we set that aside, the subjective feeling matters. And that subjective feeling connects directly to a very objective reality, ownership.
Oh, this feels crucial. The idea that when you buy digital, you don't really own it.
This is huge. It's become much clearer to consumers over the last decade. You hear stories about digital movie life. People finding out the movies they bought could just disappear if a licensing deal changed.
Right, because you didn't buy the movie, you bought a license to watch it.
Precisely. And it's exactly the same with ebook. That buy now button on Amazon, what you're actually doing is agreeing to an end user license agreement, a EULA.
The thing nobody ever reads.
Exactly. And that EULA makes it crystal clear. You're paying for permission to access the file, temporarily irrevocable. You don't own the book.
And this isn't just theoretical legalese, right? Didn't Amazon actually delete books from people's Kindles once?
They did. The infamous 1984 incident back in 2009. They remotely deleted copies of George Orwell's 1984 that people had bought because of a rights issue with the publisher who provided that specific version.
The irony is just, wow, deleting 1984.
You couldn't make it up, but it proved the point definitively. If the platform can reach into your device and take the book back, you never truly owned it. A physical book on your shelf, that's yours. Period. No company can remotely delete it.
That lack of true ownership really kills the social, doesn't it? Lending a book.
Absolutely. You can hand a paperback to a friend. No problem. You can sell it secondhand. Try doing that easily with a Kindle book.
It's locked down. I remember one of the sources mentioned a brief experiment with Kindle lending years ago.
Yeah, fascinating little anecdote. Around 2011 or 2012, they had this feature. If you lent your ebook to a friend, your access to that book was blocked for, say, 2 weeks. Just like lending a physical copy, only one person could read it.
That actually sounds like a reasonable system. Why did...
Well, you could probably guess. Publishers likely hated it.
Because lending means fewer sales.
Exactly. A true digital lending system undermines the need for everyone to buy their own copy. Getting rid of it reinforces the license model and pushes people towards buying, not borrowing. Its disappearance really hammered home that loss of control with digital.
Okay, so ownership and lending are big factors. What about cultural shifts? You mentioned millennials.
Right. So surveys suggest Millennials are a huge reading demographic right now.
Okay.
But they're also the generation raising young kids in the age of hyperconnectivity. And many of them are really concerned about screen time, device addiction for themselves and their children.
So they're trying to model different behavior.
Precise. They're consciously buying physical books for their kids to encourage reading off screen, and that behavior often reflects back on them. They might choose a physical book for themselves, partly to set that example.
It sends a different message than seeing mom or dad always on a tablet.
It really does.
Yeah.
Which leads to the last point here, the perception difference.
How people see you when you're reading.
Yeah. If you're sitting there reading a novel on your phone or tablet, what does it look like to someone else?
Like you're just on your phone, scrolling social media, checking emails, whatever.
Right. You look interruptible, available. Someone's much more likely to ask you a quick question or start a conversation because you just look like you're fiddling with a device.
But if you're holding an actual physical book,
the signal is totally different. It clearly says, I am reading, I'm focused. Please don't interrupt unless it's important. It creates a social boundary.
That's a really subtle but powerful point. The physical object commands a different kind of respect for the activity.
Exactly. The device, no matter how good the ink, carries all this other baggage of distraction and availability. The physical book is unambiguous. It's about the reading.
Okay, so we've got the human preference for the physical, the ownership issue, the perception difference, but the original promise of ebooks was also economic, right? They were supposed to be cheap.
That was the expectation, definitely. No printing, binding, shipping. Surely they'd be dirt cheap.
But they're not. Sometimes an ebook costs almost as much as the paperback or even more. How did that happen?
It's a mix of things. First, ebooks can't be free. You still have to pay the author, the editor, the cover designer, marketing cost. There's a baseline cost involved.
Sure, there are still costs, but not the massive physical production and distribution costs.
Correct. The main reason prices didn't plummet is because of how the market structure evolved and, frankly, some major legal battles.
Right, the whole Amazon versus publishers thing. Can you break that down simply?
I'll try. Initially, Amazon used what's called the wholesale model. Publishers sold ebooks to Amazon at a wholesale price, maybe half the cover price.
Okay.
Then Amazon could sell it to you, the customer, for whatever price they want. And often, they sold popular ebook for $9.99, sometimes even less, taking a loss.
Why would they take a loss?
To sell Kindles. They used cheap bestsellers as loss leaders to get everyone onto their platform and buying their device.
Ah, clever. But the publishers wouldn't have liked that $9.99 price point.
Hated it. They felt it completely devalued their books, especially new hardcovers, which they sell for $25 or $30. They worried everyone would just wait for the $9.99.
So they fought back.
You did. They pushed hard for the agency model. Under this model, the publisher sets the final consumer price for the ebook, and the retailer, like Amazon or Apple, just takes a commission, usually around 30%.
So the publisher keeps control of the price the customer.
Exactly. Apple actually helped them force this model through when they launched the iBook store with the iPad.
But wasn't there a big lawsuit about that? Collusion or something?
Yep. The U.S. Department of Justice sued Apple and 5 major publishers, accusing them of conspiring to fix ebook prices and eliminate Amazon's $9.99 pricing.
And the result?
It got complicated with settlements and rulings, but the upshot was that while blatant collusion was punished, publishers ultimately retained significant power to influence or set ebook price, preventing that race to the bottom Amazon wanted.
So prices stabilized higher than expected, often in that $12 to $15 range for new releases?
Right, which suddenly makes the calculation different for the reader. Is saving just a few dollars worth giving up actual ownership, lendability, and the physical object?
For many people, the answer was clearly no. The discount just wasn't big enough to justify the trade-offs.
Precisely. But okay, if the prices were just slightly disappointing for consumers, for institutions like public libraries, it wasn't disappointing. It was, well, devastating.
The pricing for libraries is different.
Oh, drastically different. And much, much worse. Digital media is incredibly expensive for libraries.
How so? Let's use that example from the sources, the Seattle Public Library and the Britney Spears memoir from 2023. That was eye-opening.
It really lays it bare. So for a physical copy of The Woman in Me, the library paid about $17.81. That's an asset they own that can be checked out hundreds of times over years.
Okay, standard library purchase. What about the ebook?
The consumer price might have been, say, $70.
Yeah.
But the library, they paid $64.99 for one license for the ebook.
$65 for one ebook license.
Yep. And the digital audiobook, $59.99. More than 3 times what you or I would pay.
That's insane.
It gets worse. Because demand was huge, SPL bought a lot of copies. Their total spending on physical copies was about $2,500. Significant, but manageable.
And the digital copies.
Get ready for this. Their total spending on the ebook and digital audiobook licenses for that one title, $35,000.
$35,000 for temporary digital access to one book.
$35,000
Yeah.
for access that wasn't even permanent. That's the killer part.
Yeah.
The licensing trap.
They don't even own the digital copies they pay so much for.
Publishers don't sell digital copies to libraries. They rent them under very restrictive licenses.
What kind of restrictions?
There are a few main models, all bad for libraries. One is time. For that Britney Spears book, the $65 license might only last for 2 years. After 24 months, access gone. They have to pay another $65 to keep offering.
So they're paying again and again for the same book.
Another model is checkout-based. The license is good for a set number of checkouts, maybe 26 or 52. Once the 52nd person borrows it, the license expires, and the library has to buy it again, even if it's only been available for a few months.
Wow. It feels like the system is designed to drain libraries.
It really does. Some sources called it throwing money directly out a window. They're stuck in this cycle of perpetual renting instead of building a lasting collection like they can with physical books. A physical book is an asset. A digital license is just an ongoing expense.
And the consequence for libraries.
Fewer digital books available, longer wait time. In Seattle's case, because these digital costs were so crippling, they had to cut the maximum number of digital items a patron could have on hold at one time, slashed it from 25 down to 10.
So the high cost of digital directly harms public access.
Absolutely. This economic barrier for libraries is a massive, often overlooked factor in why physical books remain so essential for public access and therefore remain prevalent overall.
Looking back at this whole ebook story, the huge hype, the rapid rise, then the unexpected plateau, it really is a perfect case study in how bad we are at predicting trends.
It absolutely is. The course has brought up that idea from Hans Rosling's book, Factfulness. We humans tend to default to linear thinking.
Meaning we see a line going up and we just assume it's going to keep going up forever in the same direction.
Exactly. We saw ebook sales shooting up in the mid-2000s, and the automatic assumption was straight line to 100% market share. Physical books are doomed. Total extinction event.
We just extended the line out indefinitely.
But real-world trends almost never work like that, do they? They follow S-curves, fast growth, then slowing down as they hit saturation, or they're humps or slides, or they get completely disrupted by something new.
You have to expect the plateau, the drop-off, the unexpected competitor.
Right. We see this pattern all the time with tech prediction. Remember the hype around, say, Google Glass, or how everyone thought 3D TVs were the absolute future of home entertainment?
Oh, yeah. Big splash, then fizzle.
We see the shiny new thing and assume it will completely replace the old thing immediately and totally. We forget about friction, human habits, economic realities, existing infrastructure.
And that's the core lesson with ebooks, isn't it? The tech itself got pretty good, solved its own problems like screen glare and navigation.
But it couldn't overcome the external fact, the human desire for ownership, the tactile experience, the social signaling of a physical book, and the economic roadblocks, especially for libraries. The trend line was bent, then flat by forces outside the technology itself.
So, given that the plateau seems real, even if the exact percentage is debatable, what does this mean looking forward? What are the things that could disrupt this current balance in public?
Well, the most obvious one right now is audiobook. Their growth is phenomenal.
Still exploding, yeah. But how do they fit in? Are they stealing readers from ebooks, physical books, or both?
That's the million-dollar question. Are they converting non-readers into listeners, growing the overall pie, or are they pulling people away from reading text? If they pull more from ebooks, that could actually strengthen physical books' relative position.
Some dynamic. And audiobooks have the same ownership issues, right? Especially with Audible dominating.
Very much so. You're typically licensing, not owning, those audio files too. And the payment structures for authors and narrators are a whole other complex debate.
Okay, so audiobooks are one big disruptor. What else?
Self-publishing continues to be massive. It's created this huge parallel market, mostly digital, that operates outside the traditional gatekeeper.
Could that eventually challenge the dominance of the big publishers and their focus on print?
It's possible. Right now, a lot of self-publishing is concentrated in specific digital-first genres, like certain types of romance or sci-fi. It might not directly compete with, say, literary fiction hardcovers, but if successful self-published authors increasingly use print on demand to offer physical copies or get picked up for traditional print runs, they're creating pathways that bypass the old system. That can fundamentally shift.
So, new routes to market. And what about just cultural trend, fad?
That's a really interesting angle the sources touched on. Right now, buying physical books, collecting special editions, showing off your bookshelf on Instagram or BookTok, it's definitely a thing. It's culturally resonant.
The shelfie phenomenon, beautiful covers, sprayed edges.
Exactly. There's a strong aesthetic component to book buying currently. The question is, how much of the current strength in physical sales is tied to this trend? Is it durable?
Meaning, when book collecting isn't quite so trendy anymore, will people drift back towards digital convenience, or have they rediscovered a lasting preference for...
That's the uncertain. Will the demand for those beautiful expensive physical editions drop off sharply if the cultural moment passes? It's hard to say.
It's funny, I think back to my own habits, like the source mentioned. After college, when I wasn't constantly needing searchable textbooks and portability wasn't my top priority, I went right back to buying physical books for pleasure reading.
Even though digital was arguably more convenient.
Yeah, it wasn't really a logical choice, it was just preference. I wanted the object. I wanted to own it, see it on my shelf, feel the pages.
And that personal story kind of sums it up, doesn't it? The technology delivered on convenience, maybe even on the reading experience eventually, but it couldn't replicate the inherent value people place on ownership, tangibility, and the focused experience a physical book represents.
The tech solved the how, but it missed the why.
Well put. The psychological and economic resistance was just too strong for the linear takeover to happen. #tag outro, synthesis and final thought.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive, it seems clear why the predicted death of the physical book just never materialized. It wasn't one single thing, but a combination of factors pushing back.
Yeah, a real trifecta of resistance. First, you had those core human factors, people genuinely liking the feel and experience of physical books, maybe remembering information better with them, and crucially, demanding real ownership, not just a temporary license.
That ownership piece feels huge. Then second, the data itself was, and still is, really messy. Excluding giants like Amazon and the entire self-publishing world, plus focusing on revenue instead of actual books read, it paints a skewed picture.
Definitely skewed. Digital is likely much bigger than the standard stats show, but the plateau is still real. And the third piece of resistance, maybe the most concrete, was the economics. Ebook prices never got low enough to make giving up ownership a no-brainer for consumers.
And for libraries, the digital pricing became completely punitive. That licensing model created a massive barrier, forcing them to prioritize physical books as actual assets rather than throwing money away on temporary digital rent.
Exactly. So, against all odds and defying those neat linear predictions, the physical book has proven incredibly resilient. The demand is stable, even growing in some areas. People value the tangible object for reasons technology alone couldn't address.
It really highlights that cultural and psychological value. So looking ahead, we talked about audiobooks and self-publishing as current disruptors.
Right. But the final thought to leave listeners with is maybe a bit broader. If those forces don't fundamentally change the game, what else could? What unforeseen cultural shift, or maybe a completely different technological leap we haven't even imagined yet, could finally be powerful enough to disrupt our deep-seated preference for the physical, tangible, ownable book?
What's the next S-curve or sudden drop hiding around the corner that we're not seeing right now?
That's the fascinating question. What could possibly displace something so enduring?